Hello. We're talking about creation, and do you realize how many questions the creation story answers? I mean, there's all kinds of questions people have, like which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or can one species be created or developed from another species? And then why not worship the sun? And then we have to think, how could plants live if they were created the day before the sun was actually created? Well, as we talk about creation for days 2 through 5, we're going to answer all of these questions and perhaps even some more that are rolling around in your mind. The second day of creation involves Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Thus God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. So God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. God said, "Let there be." And he calls into existence the firmament. Now, the firmament refers to the atmospheric heavens or the expanse surrounding the earth. Firmament is to divide the waters under it from those above it. This space has the earth on one side and the clouds and the heavenly bodies on the other side. And the lower part is occupied by the air that we breathe. Water in a liquid state was in contact with another mass of water in the shape of fog, and it was resting on the waters beneath, which had to be lifted to a higher regions of the sky and to an invisible vapor. And the result of this was a space of pure air that between the waters enveloping the surface of the earth that was suited for the vegetation and for the animals that were soon to be created in just a few days. God called the firmament heaven. And the firmament, or this first heaven, really represents the original skies. And this firmament can be divided into 3 different areas. The first heaven means the open space or the atmosphere above us. When we look out into the sky, it's the air that which we breathe and which we move, but it goes on up to where the birds are flying and the clouds are floating and all of that. Well, after that, it stretches on to what seems like a very vast and immeasurable region of space. And here we see all of the celestial luminaries on this open-ended vastness. That's where all the planets are. The sun, the moon, the stars. And it goes on and on. But above this, there is the third heaven. And the third heaven represents the abode of God. Now, the Apostle Paul caught a vision of this third heaven. And in 2 Corinthians 12:2, he says, "I know a man in Christ who, 14 years ago, whether in the body, I do not know, or out of the body, I do not know, but God knows, such a one was caught up to the third heaven." And so he said, I went directly into God's presence there. And that's when God spoke to him so much. Well, after God named the firmament heaven, it says the evening and the morning were the second day. Then on day 3, God continues his work with the waters. And day 3 involves Genesis 1, 9 through 13. But it's divided into 2 different parts. Day 3 has the twofold division of the land and waters and the creation of the plants. The first 2 days were preparatory for the introduction of the vegetation kingdom. So we'll start with verses 9 and 10. Then God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw it was good. God commanded the overflowing waters under the firmament or on the earth to be confined to limits and gathered into one place to form a designated spot for land. He called the dry land earth, denoting dry surface left after the retreat of waters. And this solid ground that we're walking on, we've got the dry land here, but you know what? He created the seas. And underneath those seas, this dirt still continues. But he gave the seas a command. You can go this far and no further. Aren't you glad? Suppose we all lived in a bog where the water was only about ankle deep. Can you imagine what that would be like, walking around in that all the time? We would be able to survive. We could grow great things like cranberries, rice. But can you imagine living in that all the time? But what did God do? He gathered together the waters, he called them seas, and God said, oh, that's good. And I am so very glad that he did that. We serve a very intelligent God who is looking out for us in everything he did in creation. He made it for our benefit so that we can enjoy this wonderful world that he has made. The gathering together of the waters he called seas. And in Scripture, seas applies to any large body of water or any collection of water that's surrounded by land, such as the Dead Sea, the Salt Sea. And we have a picture of this, of even how the process of dividing the land and the sea took place in Psalms 104, verses 6 through 8. Think about God majestically creating everything. And on this day, he is dividing the waters from the land and putting them all in their separate places. It said, you covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke, they fled. At the voice of your thunder, they hastened away. They went up over the mountains. They went down into the valley to the place which you had founded for them. It said they were all of earth was covered, but there were these high places. And the waters went down them, and they went down into the valley. It said there were even times that the water was so deep that it covered on top of the mountains. And if you go to the bottom of the oceans, it's been proven that it's not a flat surface, but there's actually within the ocean, there are lumps and bumps and mountains underneath there. And God prepared all of that way back in the beginning. So dividing the land and the waters was preparation for the creation of plants. And in verses 11 through 13, we have our introduction for that. Then God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according forth to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And so the evening and the morning were the third day. So, with God's command for land to grow plants, the earth changed its appearance. Remember way back in Genesis 1:2, it said the earth was without form and void. It was empty. There was nothing there. Well, on day 3, God created vegetation which formed a covering for the earth. Now, the created plants are divided into 3 classes: grass, herb, and trees. Now, these three classes encompass all plants, shrubs, and trees. But he makes a reference. The reference to seed and kind not only meant that God created life, but he set in motion the process that makes plant life or plants able to reproduce themselves. And then he adds, after its kind. Like produces like. And that and kinds means that the kinds or the species, they're fixed. And so in this little phrase, the theory of one species being developed from another species is denied. It's proven false. You see, when you plant a tomato seed, I love tomatoes, and I also like lima beans. Now, I can plant all the tomatoes I want, but I'm never going to get a lima bean. I'm never, ever, ever going to get my limas. The only way I can get lima beans are to plant seeds that came from the lima beans. And that's the way God developed it and designed it way back on day 3 of creation. He said, there are seeds after its kind. Plants are to bring forth after its kind. And as we look at this, we're going to be talking more and more about evolution and some of the other theories like the long day, the short day, the Big Bang, and all of that in our next session. But it's important for us to realize that when God created the kinds and the species, he created them so that there would not be that mixture of kinds. Now, you might say, well, I like a German Johnson tomato. I like one of the little cherry tomatoes. Yeah, they're very different, but they're still tomatoes. And we're going to be talking even about that term microevolution next week or next time. So, the text indicates also that the land sent forth grass, herb, and trees, each in its fully developed form. It did not send forth seed, germs, and roots. And you know what this proves? Guess what? The chicken got here before the egg. Yeah. If on day 3 there were seeds planted for those tomatoes, on day 5, when the animals came along to eat those seeds, eat the plants, and needed food to be sustained, there would be nothing there. They'd still be waiting on the tomatoes. They'd still be waiting on the limes. But no, God created the plants. And he said that when he did that he gave grass, seed, and the trees. And so all of these were set in motion. And even when we think about these 3 categories that God developed, if you take a botany class, you'll see these 3 basic divisions are still there today. You have the grass, where the seed is hidden. You don't look at the grass and automatically see its seed. The herb, it's much more evident there. But then you go to the trees, and you can just really pluck those seeds right off the tree, because inside the apple are the seeds. Inside the avocado, there's a great big seed. And so God set in motion things that we are still studying and we are still learning about these 6,000 years later. So now we come to day 4. And this is in Genesis 14 through 19. And we're going to look at the first 2 verses, 14 and 15. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. And let there be signs. Let there be for signs and seasons, for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light to the earth." And it was so. Lights in the firmament. Well, what that means to us are luminaries or light bearers. They're giving regularity and harmony to the times and the seasons of the earth. They regulate they're to regulate the phases of the moon and the relative position of stars that mark the passage of time. From our vantage point here on earth, we can look up, and as we see the moon go on its cycle, we realize what's happening there. The lights serve as a sign or a natural time meter with 3 units: the day, the month, and the year. And they mark the divisions for agricultural and for our social purposes. And also, they let us know all the periods or the eras of man's history. Day 4 refers to signs, seasons, days, and years, while day 1 only referred to the day and its twofold division, day and night, light and dark. And so the cause of the day and night is a daily rotation of the earth on its axis in conjunction with a fixed source of light. Now, we talked about, we're not sure what that source of light was for the first 3 days, but here we see this. So the variation of the years, that's due to those conditions and the annual revolution around the sun. So let's go on with verses 16 through 19. Then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the 4th day. And lights means a luminary that can either designate the sun, which emits light, or it can designate the moon, which reflects the light. God set these in place to regulate the duration and time of the day and the night. Now, how could plants have lived without the sun? Well, 2 things we have to remember. First of all, these plants did have soil, and they did have light. And secondly, these plants were only created yesterday. And yesterday means 24 hours ago. So when we realize that, it's easy for us to understand how the plants could survive. You know, since early time, people have been interested in the sun. And even back as far as the Israelites, people worshipped the sun and the stars. And God warned the Israelites that they were not to worship the sun or the stars as those of other religions, the pagans, did. They were to worship the creator of the sun. Deuteronomy 4:19 gives a very stern warning. Take heed, lest you lift your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the host of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and to serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the people under the whole earth as a heritage. Maybe the sun worship is the reason why this creation of the stars and the sun gets such a bare minimum mention in the creation story. Psalms 19:1 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork." Just think about it. Think about when we're in the presence of the one that inhabits all eternity. How can anything terrestrial or celestial not be reduced to a common level? In comparison to God, it's nothing. And so, day 4 ends as God inspects the day and approves it. Now we come to day 5. And on day 5, God, the great creator, begins a new cycle by populating the world with the animal kingdom. And here, solitude is reduced. Verses 20 and 21, then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the heaven across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created sea creatures and every living thing that moves with which the waters abounded, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw it was good. Living means that which breathes and has a body. And it even is extended to that which had a body but once breathed. So all creatures, all animals, all people, whether they are alive or have passed on, they are still under the umbrella of living creatures. Now, the animal kingdom is divided into 3 parts in relationship to the 2 regions to be inhabited: the fish and the birds, which are created on this day, and land animals, which will be created on day 6. So, the fish are subdivided only into the great sea creatures and the smaller creatures that fill the waters. So those great sea creatures, some people, especially long ago, feared them, said, the Loch Ness Monster. And they looked at them as even being afraid of the whales and all of that. But we have to realize God created them. And God not only created these living creatures, but he gave power for them to reproduce and to breed, to fill the air and the seas in numbers and variety. You see in verses 22 and 23, it says, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, and let the birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the 5th day. God blessed them. And when this term is used by God, it means to will some good to an object of the blessing. This phrase was first used in the Bible on fish and birds. It was later used 3 other times. Later in this chapter, day 6, when God created man, he blessed them. In 2nd chapter of Genesis, when the story is retold, that phrase again is used, he blessed them. And in Genesis chapter 12, when Abraham is talking to when God is talking to Abraham, he blesses him. And the blessing pronounced on the fish and the bird, nothing but abundant increase. You see, fruitful refers to the propagation of the species. Multiply foretells abundance of offsprings. And fill the waters means to let them be fully stocked. You know, trout season will soon be coming up in this area, and they'll come out and they'll start stocking the creeks, stocking the lakes with trout. Didn't have to do that then. Any type of fish that was needed, God said, it's there. You just multiply it and you fill the water, so it's there. Well, I hope as we've gone through days 2 through 5, and you've listened, and there's been a whole lot of content here. I realize that. But put your seatbelt on, because as we talk next week, we'll give a brief introduction to day 6 and 7, but then we're going to start talking about all these theories, and there's a lot to learn. See you next time.